Okay, time for some things I hate. So Barack Obama wrote a piece. I hate this kind of pandering crap. I talked a minute ago about pandering crap, giving people what they want in terms of feelings without giving them the truth. So my wife and I have a rule. I think I've mentioned it on the program before. We have a rule when she comes home and she tells me about a problem in her life, and you should implement this in your relationship. It's a good rule. She comes home and she tells me about a problem in her life. I've learned, we're married 8 years, and I learned probably 5 years ago that I need to ask a question before we go any further in the conversation. And the question is this just do you want me to just let you talk? Is this just a complaining conversation, or do you want me to solve the problem? Because men tend to be fixers. When you hear a problem, we immediately grab a hammer and a saw and we go to work trying to fix it. And this is particularly true when your wife, your girlfriend comes home and she says, I've got a problem. You go, okay, well, let's fix it. And she gets pissed, and guys don't understand why. Guys are like, why are you angry at me? You came with a problem. I solve things. I fix light bulbs. Tell me, well, what am I doing wrong? And the girl's, but you're not hearing me. You're not hearing me. And guys find this endlessly annoying, ladies. I mean, just endlessly annoying. If you tell a guy, here's my problem, then he says, well, I have a solution. She's like, well, I don't want your solution. Okay, I have solutions too, but that's not what I'm talking about now. I just want you to hear what I'm saying. So use this trick. The reason I mention this is because in politics, people say they want solutions and they're totally full of crap. What people actually want is just to bitch. All people really want is to complain about their problems. And if you tell them the solution to their problems, they don't want to hear it. So when you have feminists and they go around saying, we have a problem, and it's that women are paid less than men. And we say, well, I have a solution to that. And the solution is you have free choice. If you want to make as much as a man, then don't have babies and don't get married. Because it turns out then you'll make as much as a man who basically operates like he's not married and has no kids, right? I mean, that's the way that the statistics work in the 50 largest cities in the United States as of 2010, according to Time magazine. Women were paid 108% of what men were paid. They were paid more, as if they had the same level of education and income and education and work experience and age and all this. But feminists don't want to hear that. What they actually just want to hear is you say, you know what, you're right. Women have it so rough. I can't even tell you how rough women have it. And if a guy deigns to say anything other than that, it's, well, you're not a woman. You don't understand. You see Barack Obama do this on racial questions too, right? He'll say, well, black people all over the United States, they feel disadvantaged by the police. They feel it. And you say, well, but there's no statistical proof that that's actually happening in terms of violent shootings, for example. And if police are running into black people more often, that's probably because most of the high crime areas in the United States happen to be heavily black. Why is that a controversial thing? And if we want to solve the problem, what we really need to do is tamp down the crime rate in the black community, because it turns out that every population, when they first come to the United States, has bad relations with the police until the crime rate goes down, in which case they have great relations with the police. It happened with the Germans, it happened with the Irish, it happened with the Italians, it happened with the Jews, it's happening in Latino communities. Like, what's the big, so let's just get the crime rate down. And how about this? Like, here's a common standard. Everybody act well. Is that really tough? And people get mad. They get so mad if you say this. You're taking away their sense of initiative. You're taking away their feelings. Their feelings are being, so Barack Obama writes this ridiculous, stupid piece for Glamour magazine. Because Barack Obama's not a president, he's a pretty boy. That's all he does. I mean, President Obama's a figurehead, and he just says pretty things, and everybody goes, oh, he has feelings. He understands your feelings. So here's what he wrote. He wrote this piece called "This is what a feminist looks like," which is not true. A feminist typically looks like an overweight woman with blue hair and nose ring and all that. So that's okay. I'm just joking. There are lots of feminists who don't look like that. There's real feminists and there's fake feminists. Okay, my mom's a real feminist. Like, she actually worked and my dad stayed home and she took care of her family and she had kids and she made all the right decisions. My wife is a feminist, right? She's because I consider feminism the notion that women can make any choice they want to make in life. My wife is a feminist. She's working as a doctor right now. Right? She's a doctor. She's more accomplished than any of these whiny feminist activists. I'm a feminist because I enable my wife to go and make the choices she wants to make in her life and encourage her to do so. And I'll do the same for my daughter, and I've done the same for my sisters and my mom. But Barack Obama says he's what a feminist looks like. What feminists look like are people who allow feminists to whine as much as possible. That's what feminists look like. Here's what Obama writes. He writes, there are a lot of tough aspects to being president, but there are some perks too. Meeting extraordinary people across the country, holding an office where you get to make a difference in the life of the nation. Air Force One. But perhaps the greatest unexpected gift of this job has been living above the store. For many years, my life was consumed by long commutes. It's often meant I had to work even harder to be the kind of husband and father I want to be. And then he talks about it, and then he goes on and on and on and on. And finally he gets to, in my lifetime, we've gone from a job market that basically confined women to a handful of often poorly paid positions to a moment when women not only make up roughly half the workforce, but are leading in every sector, from sports to space, from Hollywood to the Supreme Court. So you'd think, okay, now it's celebration time. Yay, good job, America. Nope. Nope. In fact, he says, the most important change may be the toughest of all, and that's changing ourselves. Okay, we're changing ourselves. Barack Obama came along, and his wife said, if you recall, his wife said he would change our souls. Right? He could heal our souls. He could heal the soul of the nation. I don't need anyone healing my soul. It's what I got God for. I don't need my soul healed. In fact, my soul isn't the problem. It's the rest of me that's the problem, right? If you're a religious person, you tend to believe that the soul is straight from God. It's not your soul that's broken, right? It's the rest of you. It's your conscience maybe that's broken. But Barack Obama says we have to change as people. Marxists, which is what Obama is, they have a deep, abiding belief, a real deep belief that people change on a root level. That if we just change the economic circumstances of human beings, then they change as people. Like they actually their souls actually change. Like if people made more money, they would become better people, which is ironic because they consider the rich people in American society the worst, right? So they say, as you become more wealthy in American society, you become more corrupt. But if we made poor people more wealthy, they'd become better, which is weird. He says, this is something I spoke about at length in June in the first ever White House summit on the United State of Women, which, by the way, would be just the most estrogen-filled country in the world, the United State of Women. I mean, goodness, there wouldn't be any agreement on when to go to war. There wouldn't be, somebody would say to the women's army, go take that hill, and a woman would go, why? I don't want that hill. That hill is nothing for me. As far as we've come, all too often we are still boxed in by stereotypes about how men and women should behave. No, actually, we're not boxed in enough by stereotypes about how men and women should behave, it turns out. Men should behave like gentlemen, and women should behave like ladies. I know, that's sexist and terrible. All of that is really just shorthand for everyone should behave like a human being, like a mensch, be a good person. He says, one of my heroines is Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, who was the first African-American to run for a major party's presidential nomination. She once said the emotional, sexual, and psychological stereotyping of females begins when the doctor says it's a girl. No, that's inaccurate. That's when we know she's a girl. You know, if you're stereotyping, then don't do it. But, I mean, like, really. Now, the most important people in my life have always been women, says Barack Obama. I was raised by a single mom who spent much of her career working to empower women in developing countries. That is untrue. Your mom took you to Indonesia, and then she basically abandoned you with your grandparents when you were like 7. So that's not true. He watched as my grandmother, who helped raise me, worked her way up at a bank only to hit a glass ceiling. Also untrue, his grandmother never hit a glass ceiling. She was a vice president at a bank. He says, I've seen how Michelle has balanced the demands of a busy career and raising a family. Michelle certainly has never hit a glass ceiling. Michelle went to Harvard Law School, got a job at a ritzy law firm in Chicago, and then got a job paying her $300,000 a year to do nothing for the University of Chicago health system. So that's nonsense. And then he says, I was often away from home, serving in the state legislature while juggling my teaching responsibilities as a law professor. I can look back now and see that while I helped out, it was usually on my schedule and on my terms. The burden disproportionately and unfairly fell on Michelle. Well then, buddy, that's your fault. That's your fault. And that presumably that's a decision you made with your wife. If your wife said no, I guess that you and she have to make a decision, don't you? But I guess she's the victim. She's always the victim. And he says, I'd like to think I've been pretty aware of the unique challenges women face. It's what has shaped my own feminism. But I have to admit, when you're the father of 2 daughters, you become even more aware of how gender stereotypes pervade our society. And then he talks about how he absorbed messages of masculinity from magazines, and then he realized his ideas about being a tough guy or cool guy weren't me. And they said, we need to keep changing attitudes. We need to change the attitude that raising our girls to be demure and our boys to be assertive, that criticizes our daughters for speaking out and our sons for shedding a tear. Okay, nobody's criticizing a girl for being assertive. Go all the way back to Little Women, and Joe March is being assertive. Okay, and that thing was written like 150 years ago. So, no. It turns out that men in Western civilization have been pretty okay with assertive women to the point of men voting to give women the vote. Okay, it wasn't women who won some sort of war for the vote. Men gave women the vote. They did that because they were being gentlemen and decent human beings. And then he says, we need to keep changing the attitude that punishes women for their sexuality and rewards men for theirs. Okay, this is one of the things that drives me absolutely nuts. The idea that women ought to be rewarded for being promiscuous. I don't think men should be rewarded for being promiscuous. But let's be real about something, okay? The reason that biology makes men more promiscuous, okay, in every species that we know about, men are more promiscuous than women. Males are more promiscuous than females. In virtually every species that we know about in the animal kingdom, males are more promiscuous. Why? Because they are spreading their seed. Females are less promiscuous. Why? Because they have to be selective in their sexual partners. This is not rare, and it's not unique to human beings. These are not gender stereotypes. That is a fact. Okay, that is a fact. The fact is nobody should be rewarded for their sexuality. I mean, I don't understand why you should be rewarded for your sexuality. Like, sexuality is something you do. Are you rewarded for your eating? Like, it's such a bizarre notion. He says we need to keep changing the attitude that permits the routine harassment of women, whether they're walking down the street or daring to go online. Okay, first of all, you shouldn't harass women walking down the street, gang. And daring to go online, there's a nice thing about Twitter. It's called a mute button. If Lena Dunham doesn't like being quote-unquote harassed online, perhaps she shouldn't brag in her memoir about molesting her sister. And perhaps she should use the mute button if she doesn't want to hear from people. Turns out that we live in a society where anyone can say what they want. He says we need to keep changing the attitude that teaches men to feel threatened by the presence and success of women. I don't feel threatened by the presence and success of women. I don't think most men do. I think men don't like women who treat them badly, and they don't like men who treat them badly. He says we need to keep changing the attitude that congratulates men for changing a diaper, stigmatizes full-time dads, and penalizes working mothers. Okay, first of all, again, it's real keeping time now, folks, and this is not me trying to soothe thy feelings, okay? Because, again, I don't care about them. Here's the deal. Women have a greater drive to take care of babies than men do. They do. Sorry, biology. It just is. If they didn't, they'd abandon the kids when the kids are born. Women have a greater drive to take care of their children than men do. It's why men routinely abandon their kids and women almost never do. And just factually speaking, in terms of crime rates, in terms of single parenthood, you never see the mother give birth, leave the kid, and then just give the kid to the dad and take off. It's extraordinarily rare. Why? Because women have a natural bond to their child that men don't have, and a physical bond to their child that men don't have. But, like, we're just going to pretend that men and women are exactly the same. This is coming from a guy, by the way, who had a working mom and a full-time dad. My dad stayed home and took care of us. My mom worked. He says we need to keep changing the attitude that values being confident, competitive, and ambitious in the workplace unless you're a woman. No. And he says then you're being bossy, and suddenly the very qualities you thought were necessary for success end up holding you back. Again, my mom runs a company. People don't think she's bossy because she's not bossy. If people are calling you bossy, lady, maybe it's not because you're a woman, maybe it's because you're actually bossy. You know, men, we don't call them bossy, we just call them a-holes. Right? When men are bossy, like, I tend to be, I like to flatter myself that I'm a pretty good boss to the people that I work with. If I were a real jerk to the people I work with, I assume they would call me a jerk, and that has nothing to do with sex. That has everything to do with being a jerk. Again, this all comes down, this is Obama just soothing feelings. Have you heard anything here that's actually practical? Anything? Anything that fixes anybody's problems? Have you heard it? I haven't. Haven't heard anything. All I've heard is, women, you're right to feel like men hate you. But not me. But not me. I love you, ladies. You've had it so rough. You've had such a tough life. Everything is so wrong. You know, you can say all those other men hate you and are sexist, but I'm not. I'm a feminist. I'm really a feminist. It's the same way that you have white kids in college, and they say, yeah, I understand my own white privilege. And it's like, oh, well, now you're off the hook scot-free. You don't actually have to do anything. Congratulations. So I guess Obama's the president. He's not actually going to do anything to make women's lives better. Like, for example, you know what would make women's lives better that Obama could do and it would actually have an impact? How about Barack Obama did a speech, just one speech, one. That's all I'm asking. And the entire content of the speech was, men, stay with the women you impregnate. Marry them. Marry those women before you impregnate them. Get married before you knock some lady up. What if he did that? Would that be the end of the world? But he couldn't do that because then he'd be judging the women who have had babies out of wedlock and the men who have abandoned those babies. Wouldn't want to make anyone feel bad. This whole long, convoluted piece is just this whole routine about what a wonderful man is. It's just a long virtue signaling. It says it's absolutely men's responsibility to fight sexism as spouses, partners, and boyfriends. We need to work hard and be deliberate about creating truly equal relationships. He says, as a parent, helping your kids to rise above these constraints is a learning process. Michelle and I have raised our daughters to speak up when they see a double standard or feel unfairly judged based on their gender or race, or when they notice that happening to someone else. It's important for them to see role models out in the world who climb to the highest levels of whatever field they choose. Vote Hillary, yay. And that's really what this whole thing is supposed to be. And then he says at the very end, he just says it right at the very end. He says, this fall we enter a historic election. It's a historic moment for America. No, it's really not. It's not an important moment for America. The only thing that's important is we're about to elect, of two crappy candidates, we're about to elect a crappy president, either the crappy woman or the crappy man. It's silly. But again, all of this comes back to this feeling in politics that I hate more than pretty much anything, that you are supposed to pander to people's feelings rather than telling them the facts. There are sexists out there. There are men who have said, I've seen it. I saw when I was working at a law firm in L.A. There's a guy who ran the office, and he would routinely wait until a woman stepped off the office. If any other guy was in the elevator, and he would make some sort of derogatory sexual remark. I know that there are men who do this sort of stuff. I know there are men who are sexist. If there are men who are sexist, and if they behave in a sexist fashion, then they should be punished by their companies. Then they should be told no by the people who are in the elevator with them. There should be social stigmas, not legal stigmas attached to speech. There should be social stigmas and legal stigmas attached to behavior, right? But beyond that, I need an actual wrong to right. Don't just tell me sexism is out there somewhere in the ether. I'm not going to go ghost hunting with you. I have no interest. Ghostbusters sucked originally, and it sucks even more when we do the social justice warrior crap where we just put a bunch of women in there. So Barack Obama virtue signaling, that's the thing that I hate for today.